The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferens.
A big win for project labor agreements in a U.S. appellate court. A bipartisan group of lawmakers unveil the Know Your Labor Rights Act. And today on the show, the United Steelworkers fight at British Petroleum. Welcome to the Tuesday, April 28th edition of America's Workforce, where we're available on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. Eric Schultz will be our featured guest on the show today. He is president of United Steelworkers Local 7-1. And boy, I tell you, he's got a fight on his hand. I want to drive you to the website here because his workers need your support. So the website is real simple, supportoilworkers.com, supportoilworkers.com. Let me explain what happened here. About a month ago, British Petroleum locked out more than 800 union members at their refinery. This would be in Whiting, Indiana, which, by the way, is the largest inland refinery in the country. This lockout happened after 2 months of contract talks and after members voted 98% to authorize a strike. So the company said, well, you're going to go on strike. We're just going to lock you out. Well, here's what's going on. The company not returning to the bargaining table. In the meantime, there have been recruiters offering $127 an hour to refinery workers along the Gulf Coast to come to Indiana for what they're calling a 6-month project. And they're using scabs and management to try to do some of the work that the union has been doing. Now, let me tell you something. Working in a refinery, well, first of all, it's a very dangerous job, and there's a lot posted on the web. If you go back to the Deepwater Horizon explosion some years back, very, very horrible. Workers died in that, and it's appropriate that we're talking about this today because today is Workers' Memorial Day. Today, somebody in America, 15 people in America, will wake up and not come home at the end of the day. More on that coming up in a minute here. But Eric Schultz, he's going to spell it out for us as our featured guest on the show today. He serves as president of United Steelworkers Local 7-1. Again, the website is supportoilworkers.com, supportoilworkers.com. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. We're talking $38 billion and growing of assets under advisement serving the needs of Taft-Hartley funds, corporations, public funds, endowments, foundations, as well as religious organizations. You can find more at BoydWatterson.com. A 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals, this is for the 11th Circuit, affirmed the denial of a preliminary injunction which was sought by the Associated Builders and Contractors through its Florida-based operations. The association attempted to block a Biden-era executive order requiring contractors to enter into project labor agreements with labor unions on any federal construction project valued at or above $35 million. We talked a whole lot about that on this show when Biden was in office. Well, get this. The Chief Judge, William Pryor, concluded that the plaintiffs were unlikely to succeed on the merits of their claims, which were brought under the Competition Act, the First Amendment, the Administrative Procedure Act, the Office of Federal Procurement Policy Act, and the National Labor Relations Act. Now, the Trump administration they decided to defend the PLA rule, and it shocked many in the construction industry given its positions, the administration's positions, on other wage and affirmative action requirements for federal contractors. Now, labor advocates in the industry have welcomed the development. Of course they did. Here's Sean McGarvey, president of the North American Building Trades Unions. He wrote, this was last year yet, that PLAs remain the most reliable tool to ensure that large-scale infrastructure projects are delivered on time, number one, on budget, number two, and number three, to the highest standards of quality and safety. The decision to reinforce the PLA executive order will create more middle-class careers for both union as well as non-union workers. You know, if you missed Sean McGarvey's podcast, go back to awfpodcast.com. I got to do a shout out here to the Harvard Law School because this is the law school that put together the On Labor blog. If you get an opportunity, go check that out, onlabor.org. And Andrew Strom, our designated labor lawyer, does a lot of work for them. Well, when we posted Sean's show last week, they picked it up. So we certainly do appreciate that. And of course, last week was the 2026 Legislative Conference in Washington. They had over 3,000 people going to that conference. So once again, just another plug for the podcast that we did last week with Sean McGarvey. That's posted at awfpodcast.com. Again, kudos to the Harvard Law School for sending that podcast out to all of their members and then some. Meanwhile, a bipartisan group of lawmakers has unveiled the Know Your Labor Rights Act, legislation that would require all employers to post and maintain notices informing employees of their workplace rights. The bill, introduced by Senators Josh Hawley out of Missouri, Maggie Hassan, Democrat out of New Hampshire, Representatives Riley Moore out of West Virginia, he's a Republican, and Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, Democrat out of Washington, would also mandate that employers notify new hires of their rights upon hiring with penalties imposed on noncompliance. Sean O'Brien, General President of the Teamsters, has backed the proposal, saying it would help put power back in the hands of workers. Now, Hawley is also backing separate legislation to accelerate timelines for companies to negotiate initial collective bargaining agreements with newly unionized workers, a House version of which saw Representative Dawn Norcross, Democrat out of New Jersey, file a discharge petition that happened last week to force a floor vote on that one. We talked about that on the show. That is certainly one to watch. I want to welcome back those that are listening to our Workers' Memorial Day series today. Very special day. Today is April 28th, and that date carries a meaning most people do not know. You listen to this show, you know about it, but a lot of people don't. It's the anniversary of the day OSHA first opened its doors. It's also the very reason we observe Workers' Memorial Day on this date every year. Today's episode isn't about a single disaster. It's about everything those disasters built. The National Labor Office of Blue Cross Blue Shield is proud to present this segment. You know, Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies formed out of a need to provide affordable health care to teachers, loggers, and miners. Back in 1965, the Blues developed the National Labor Office to strengthen its commitment to organized labor. Blue Cross Blue Shield's National Labor Office remains focused on America's workers, advocating for affordable and equitable health care. Partnering with strategic alliances to provide industry-leading products and services, and proudly serving more than 18 million unionized workers, retirees, and their families, all working hard for America's working families for the health of America. You can learn more by following them at Blue Labor on LinkedIn and X, formerly known as Twitter. April 28, 1971. For the first time in American history, a single federal agency opened its doors with one mission: to make sure workers came home alive. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, was born. And the date it chose to open, April 28th, the same date we now observe as Workers' Memorial Day. The year before OSHA existed, 14,000 workers died on the job in the United States. 2.5 million more were injured. There were no universal safety standards, no guaranteed right to a workplace free from recognized dangers. For most workers, you either accepted the risk or you just didn't work. Now, OSHA didn't come from nowhere. It came from Triangle Shirtwaist, from Monongah, from Hawks Nest, from Farmington. For decades, workers have been dying while the country looked away. Well, President Richard Nixon signed the Occupational Safety and Health Act into law in December 1970. 4 months later, the agency was open for business, covering 56 million workers on day one. Today, we mark the anniversary of that founding, not as a celebration, but as a reminder of what it took to get here and what we stand to lose if we stop fighting to protect it. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the steelworkers fight at British Petroleum. Back in a few minutes, you're listening to America's Workforce.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
Hire union musicians. Call Music Talent of Cleveland at 216-881-1802. Call Music Talent of Cleveland as your dependable source for professional musicians in Northeast Ohio. Union musicians add harmony to weddings, elegance to parties, and uplifting music for all events. Music Talent of Cleveland contracts solo and ensemble musicians as well as bands and orchestras for single engagements. So hire union musicians. Call Music Talent of Cleveland today. 216-881-1802. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, where you can find more at teamster.org.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
It takes LiUNA to build North America's infrastructure. From roads and bridges to schools and skyscrapers, the men and women of LiUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, build the projects we depend on. From constructing the Freedom Tower on the site of the former World Trade Center to untangling Washington, D.C.'s congested interstate, LiUNA members do the work that matters. Find out what it takes to be built by LiUNA at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Ironworkers. You can find more at ironworkers.org. The Ironworkers Great Lakes District Council, consisting of 8 ironworker local unions in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan. We build the skylines and bridges along the Great Lakes. With more work than ever before, the Great Lakes District Council is actively searching out the next great ironworker, whether it's building the next Intel plant or constructing a bridge to safely connect our great cities along the lake. So join the Ironworkers Great Lakes District Council today. Find out how and learn more about the council by visiting iwdistrictcouncil.com.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. Let's go to our featured guest today. That would be Eric Schultz. On behalf of the United Steelworkers, proud sponsors of America's Workforce, Eric is president of Local 7-1, which is based in Whiting, Indiana. And recently, British Petroleum locked out more than 800 union members at their refinery there, which, by the way, is the largest inland refinery in the country. This comes after 2 months of contract talks and after members voted 98% to authorize a strike. Eric, welcome to America's Workforce. Thanks for joining us today. I appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy here, and this is a sad situation. And these lockouts are absolutely ridiculous. And once again, these oil companies are making a whole lot of money. They just want to hold on to it for themselves and not spread a little bit of the wealth here. So give me a little bit more on your local. Let's start there. You've been president for how long? A little history on yourself, and then we'll get into what matters here with regard to that refinery and the lockout. Go ahead, my brother.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. Again, name's Eric Schultz. I've been the president of this local for about 4 years now. First came onto the union board back in 2014, so about 12 years serving on the union board. We represent in total about 900 members, including the refinery, who about 800 members who are locked out, as well as some pipeline workers who their contract is still rolling or still out there. We haven't had a settlement on that contract, and then a few other bargaining units as well.
What happened here? I mean, what you're trying to get a contract, and obviously they're not budging at all.
I mean, it became apparent early on that only one party was interested in getting a contract. It's our opinion that the company had just surface bargained the entire time, really textbook bad faith bargaining, never really intended to get a contract. Their intent was to either push us into a strike, or if we didn't strike, eventually they would lock us out. And you could see that's evidenced by right now the economic climate. If this was a short-term decision, they'd have us in there right now. We'd be running at 100% capacity, making as much money as possible. Instead, they choose a time when fuel is already constrained due to geopolitical issues, and they still continue to lock us out. So we could tell early on that this was something that they were pushing for, and the end game of they just want to try to eliminate the union here in Whiting, Indiana.
So I understand they want you to give up all bargaining rights.
Wouldn't say all bargaining rights, but for intents and purposes, I mean, when they want to reclassify every single job classification out here and then have language in that proposal that says that going forward, anything that the company feels that they need to change in order to be efficient and profitable, then they have the right to change it. Then that pretty much eliminates bargaining rights. They've also proposed for us to waive any and all legal rights to bargain over the implementation or use of artificial intelligence in the plant. They've also proposed for us to waive any legal bargaining rights over timekeeping, time clocks, how people are tracked inside the refinery.
Is this part of their MO at British Petroleum?
It's hard to answer that because we're the only unionized refinery that British Petroleum has in the United States. They've only got 2 refineries left, ours here in Whiting, and then another refinery in Cherry Point. So this seems to be, I guess the best answer is this is something that we've seen Exxon do in the past. ExxonMobil in Beaumont, Texas in 2019 had a very similar playbook. They got the local to get off a pattern, to agree to a contract that was a 6-year contract when national oil bargaining, when the pattern across the country was a 4-year contract. They also got them to agree to a very lengthy strike and lockout clause. Then the very next contract cycle, they put very similar proposals on the table and locked the union out for 10 and a half months. That was the 2019 negotiation cycle. Shortly after, British Petroleum hired the union busting lead negotiator away from ExxonMobil, and now he's been meddling with our contract negotiations first in 2022 and then now again during this cycle.
So what's the status of the work at the refinery? And, obviously right now there's a demand for oil and oil prices have gone up. Are they keeping it in operation? In other words, are they bringing in scabs?
They've definitely seen a lot of plates from Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, a lot of out-of-state plates flooding into the refinery. So they've got a mix of salaried individuals, whether they're supervisors, engineers, administrators. We've got salaried employees running, and they're running on 12-hour shifts inside the refinery. That combined with some out-of-state scabs. I mean, it's a small community. We all have friends and family that are working on the inside. We've got the husband's locked out and the wife is working on the inside and vice versa. So we know what they're at right now, and they're far below 100% capacity. We typically run around 460,000 barrels of crude a day. They're fluctuating between 300 and 390,000 barrels of crude a day. So they're missing out on a lot of opportunity.
You said about the husband and wife. I need a little clarification on that. So the husband's locked out, but the wife is working. Did I hear that correctly?
Absolutely. We have couples that are, one's a salaried individual, one's an hourly individual, and it's very hard on families. It's cousins, brothers, friends that you grow up with. Again, it's a pretty tight-knit community. So we all know people that are on the inside right now.
Here's what scares me about this conversation. Yeah, this is a dangerous job. Let's be honest about this. A very dangerous job. There have been issues over the years with refineries. People killed. I'm thinking of Deepwater some years back. I'm sure you're very familiar with what happened.
The British Petroleum refinery in Texas City as well.
So did they do any training with these people? I understand that there was a 6-month project they put out, and they're just trying to be coy about this whole situation. But these people that are running the plant right now, sounds like they may not be prepared for something that may go wrong.
Absolutely. It's a difficult plant to run when the 800 men and women that are currently locked out, when we're in there, it is still a difficult plant to run. It's a combination of a very, very old plant that's been here for over 100 years and then some newer equipment that has never really ran the way it was intended to. The men and women that are in there normally on a day-to-day basis, they're excellent at being able to take potential issues and minimize them. So now without those folks in there, yeah, absolutely. It's one thing when it's smooth running and you're out there just taking samples and making sure everything's okay. The real issue is going to come when we have equipment failures, which it's part of the business, especially when you work for a company that doesn't want to pay to invest in and upgrade the equipment and maintain the equipment properly. So it's just a matter of time. And we're very worried about the safety of the folks inside as well as people in the community.
Yeah, all the more reason that something bad can happen if they didn't upgrade the facility. We're speaking with Eric Schultz. Eric is president of Steelworkers Local 7-1 out of Whiting, Indiana. Here's the website you want to go to, supportoilworkers.com, supportoilworkers.com. And we're talking about a lot of union members that voted. And this is, I'm looking at 94% of union members who voted in the past month. 98.3 voted not to accept BP's offer. Did they say this was, I hear this so much, this was their last and final offer? Did they throw that at you, Eric?
Yeah, that's correct. They threw it out as this is our last, best, and final offer. Our bargaining committee debated just rejecting it. After taking it back and thinking about it, we debated whether we're going to reject it outright or take it back to the membership for a vote. And we decided, let's go ahead and send a message to the company because we know what our membership's going to say about it. Their last, best, and final proposal took our contract from cover to cover and gutted it. Most useful provisions, useful for a union worker. We took it back to the membership knowing that it was going to be overwhelmingly rejected. I was pleasantly surprised at the turnout to have 94% of people show up to vote when you only have a 14-hour, 16-hour voting window. You got vacations and sickness. Yeah, so 94% of people showing up and over 98% of them rejected it.
Yeah, that's called solidarity. No doubt about that. Eric, I have a couple more questions. The most important I want to know where we go from here. Now, I understand there's been a couple of rallies. There's going to be more rallies. Let's talk about that next. Eric Schultz, our featured guest on behalf of the Steelworkers Local 7-1. Again, that website, supportoilworkers.com. They need some help. We'll continue with Eric right after this on America's Workforce.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
It takes LIUNA to keep America running. Over 70,000 public employees are part of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, delivering critical services such as healthcare and emergency response, as well as maintaining roads and sanitation systems. Even the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, representing over 47,000 U.S. postal workers, is affiliated with LIUNA. Find out what it takes for LIUNA to keep America running at liuna.org. That's LIUNA.org.
America's Workforce is presented by the Laborers International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at liuna.org.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
Rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining, atomic energy, and the service sector.
we are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Heat and Frost Insulators Labor Management Cooperative Trust. Find out more at insulators.org/LMCT.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org.
Now, back to Ed Flash Farrens with America's Workforce.
And don't forget, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, here's what you do. Just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis and give us a rating. We always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. Eric Schultz is our featured guest today on behalf of the Steelworkers. We're talking about Local 7-1, well over 800 union members at a refinery in Whiting, Indiana, the largest inland refinery in the country. And after some contract talks that went on for several months, the members voted 98% to authorize a strike. Let me ask you this, how are they holding up? You know, strikes are tough. I also want to talk about the people. They don't want to pay the workers, but they'll pay the scabs, okay? But how are the workers holding up right now, in your opinion, Eric?
So far, solidarity has been great. We've had more of a problem trying to keep people calm down and make sure that we've got manageable picket locations and we don't have too many people out here. It just becomes a logistics nightmare. So what we've done is gone to a model with skeleton crews around the clock. We'll do picket parties from time to time when we can really turn some people out. But spirits have been great. We've got people that are just volunteering around the clock to help, whether it's run the haul or drive people to the picket lines, make sure that the firewood's stocked. Solidarity has been through the roof. Now, we don't expect this to be a short-term lockout. These oil companies have incredibly deep pockets. So it's one thing at the beginning of a strike or a lockout. It's one thing to have good spirits. It's another thing 3, 4, 5, 6 months in. But I'm confident that our membership's ready for this.
I understand these recruiters, a number of them, everybody's looking at ways to make money, and they're paying recruiters, what is this, $127 an hour to refinery workers along the Gulf Coast? A lot of that has happened already then?
That is correct. There's job postings readily available. One that you're referencing was looking for, it was a 6-month project. So trying to be cute with their words here, calling it a 6-month project, which is really, the project is to bust the union here by locking out 800 workers and starving them. But $127 an hour plus benefits to come up here and scab for 6 months, which is obviously well more than our members make. And yet the company's willing to pay well over double what people make just to bust them.
Well, let's talk about what some of the specifics and what you're looking for. Obviously, wages with inflationary times, you want to get that. You also mentioned in the first segment about the fact that this is an old plant and it needs to be upgraded, which if it's an old plant, it means it's, safety is an issue there. So can you be specific on what you're trying to achieve here in whatever talks happen here eventually?
One thing to be clear about is this is not a strike, right? We didn't take the initiative to walk away from work because we're trying to gain something. British Petroleum chose to lock us out because they're trying to gain something. And what they're trying to gain is complete control over the workforce. They want to gut the contract of any useful provisions, including plant seniority rights, strike language, layoff language, bargaining rights. Some of the things that we do have on the table, which we spent very little time talking to, we've probably spent 90% of the time at the table talking about the company's issues. We don't believe they ever intended to bargain in good faith, but we did have a proposal to increase the number of our health and safety representatives, had a proposal to guarantee X amount of hours of safety training, in-person, hands-on safety training per year, both of which the company has rejected those proposals and really wants nothing to do with those proposals. But you speak to wages, and really this isn't about us looking for anything outside of what national oil bargaining, the pattern is, or what we think is fair for our members. Yeah, again, we've been locked out because of the company. The company decided to take the initiative to try to bust the union here.
I was reading in one of the news releases from the steelworkers, they want to eliminate and outsource more than 100 union jobs at that facility. My question is, well, I understand eliminating. I mean, they're always trying to do that. How do you outsource a job at a refinery, though? That's my question.
Yeah, so and to back up, initially their proposal was around 200 union jobs. They were proposing to take our board operators and make that a salaried job, which would eliminate nearly 100 union jobs. And then they've gotten off of that proposal, but they're still proposing to eliminate our entire USW environmental tech department and then outsource that to a third-party contractor. It's just so that they can wash their hands of the responsibility of policing environmental matters inside the refinery. And that's a very important issue to us. They're also proposing to eliminate 4 of our maintenance craft lines and outsource those to the third-party contractors. And they've hired a general contractor firm called Turner Industries out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So Turner has some union employees and a lot of non-union employees. And from our understanding is their plan is to start to bring up a lot of folks from down around the Gulf and backfill our jobs, put us out in the street, and then utilize these workers from Texas, Louisiana to come take our jobs.
You know, Eric, this is just another example of the hollowing out of middle America and the middle class. I mean, Whiting, Indiana cannot be a very big town. I don't know what the population is, but when you lock out over 800 members, that's got to be devastating to the community. And I'm sure the community has responded to that. Can you give us a little insight into that?
Yeah, absolutely. The community support's been outstanding from day one, whether it's businesses reaching out to us and asking, how can I get a sign in the window to show support, to businesses 2-3 times a day bringing warm meals to the union hall so that picketers could have a warm meal to eat. And it's not even just businesses. We've had other unions in the area, as well as just residents, come to the hall and bring us baked goods and just show their support. So the community support has been outstanding. It is a huge impact to this region, especially when you've got hundreds of people from the Gulf up here right now working, taking that money and sending it back home. That's money that's typically put back into local small businesses. That money's not being put back into the small businesses right now.
Yeah, well, they don't care about that. Those of you listening, here's the website, and I assume people can go there to help out, supportoilworkers.com. Is that a good place to go?
Absolutely. That's kind of the jumping off point if people want to look to figure out what they could do if they want to come spend some time on a picket site with us, if they want to donate a meal, if they'd like to send a check to help with our assistance committees, all that information, as well as news articles, some contractual information, giving people like a rundown of what the issues are right now. It's supportoilworkers.com.
Well, Eric, you got a great union behind you. I don't have to tell you that. And I'll tell you, I come from a steelworker family. My dad was a steelworker for 42 years. And in fact, I worked with him back in the early 70s when I got out of high school. I couldn't for the life of me figure out how he was able to be there for 4 decades. But I decided to get into broadcasting. I enjoy what I'm doing, and I enjoy talking about people like yourself about what's going on in those mills. And these mills, especially since they're not upgraded, are not safe, and they need to be addressed. Sadly, it's just not happening. And you got these very greedy oil companies involved. But to have that powerful union, I understand Roxanne Brown, your new general president, address this. Did she come to the plant and talk to the people?
Yeah, absolutely. Roxy was out here a couple of weeks ago, walked the picket lines, talked to our members. We held a press conference with some local Chicago media, but we've been in touch with Roxanne from day one. The International has been doing a great job. We've got a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes between the legal department, our strategic campaigns department. I actually just got back in town. We were out in Washington, D.C. for a few days, trying to reach out to every congressman and woman and senator that we could to let them know what our side of the story is and how they can help us. We had a group that was down in Houston that the International helped organize for us. Went down last week to participate in an oil conference and bring awareness to the oil industry of what British Petroleum is doing in Whiting. And there's a lot more events that a lot of them we don't bring up until they're fully fledged, but we've got a lot more in the pipeline that's coming as well.
Well, Eric, you let us know here on America's Workforce. We are the #1 union podcast in the country for the last 3 years. So we got a very, very wide audience here, and they're all union. There's a lot of solidarity on this side of the fence. So you keep us posted on anything that's going on. And I want to drive everybody to the website at supportoilworkers.com. Help them out. They're all locked out there for a little over a month now. Supportoilworkers.com. Eric, stay safe and stay strong. Okay, brother?
Thank you, brother. Appreciate everything.
And that'll be it for another edition of America's Workforce. Tomorrow, our independent labor voice, Tom Buffenbarger, and SEIU Local 105 in the state of Colorado. Until then, all of you have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.